What's better than a pumpkin bag? A pumpkin bag with handles you can grab and go. Hi, I'm Christina, a digital pattern maker who loves to create wearable art that I can wear and share, and sometimes some fun accessories. Today, I will walk you through sewing up this cute pumpkin tote with handles. It is as simple as the drawstring version, but with a fun twist. Those handles. You will find the sewing pattern linked in the description below so you can follow along and create your own amazing pumpkin bag with handles. Let's get sewing. I'm going to use patternprojector.com to project out my pattern. So the first thing I need to do is calibrate it. It is so easy to calibrate your projector using patternprojector.com. And if you have not tried this website yet and have a projector, I highly recommend using it because it's so easy, so precise, and I absolutely love it and cannot recommend it enough. Once I am all calibrated, I'm going to upload my pattern to patternprojector.com and then lay out my fabric and get cutting. I'm going to start with cutting my lining fabric, which is this really cute pumpkin themed fabric that I think will be an excellent choice for the inside, as well as if I ever want to flip the inside to the outside, it will be a completely reversible bag, and I'll have this really cute fabric that I can use. Now I do want to make sure that I am cutting it the right way because it is directional. So if you have directional fabric, make sure you cut it the right way. Now we're going to move on to the base of the bag. I want to have this bag be a little bit more stiff, have a little bit more structure. So I'm going to have a base layer of some heavier canvas. I'm going to lay that down first. Then I'm going to lay down a orange piece on top of it, and I'm going to cut them out together. I'm going to do this because I am going to flatline them together, and then I'll be working with it as one piece next. Once I have the main part of my bag cut out, I'm going to move and cut out my handles. There we go. That is one side of the handles. Now I do need another side of the handles. However, I don't want it to be so thick that I struggle turning the handles right side out. So I am going to do a second layer of just the orange. The last thing I need to cut out is the stem of the pumpkin bag. I'm going to get out my green fabric here, and I'm going to fold it in half and cut it on the double because I want a top and a bottom so I can sew it together and then create some really nice crisp pumpkin stem points. I am going to cut one side at a time up. This is just a little bit faster, so I'm not trying to change angles. And I go up one side on each of those points, move to the other side, and come back up the other side. Awesome. Now it is time to move over to the sewing machine. And the first thing we're going to do is flatline our pieces together. I'm going to start with the handle pieces. I am flatlining the heavier canvas to the orange fabric. And I'm just going right on the edge. I want it in my seam allowance so that I can then treat these two fabric pieces as one. Then I'm going to go ahead and move on to the bag. I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to flat line all the way around my bag pieces, merging the heavy canvas with the orange. There we go. Now it's time to create our bag. We're going to fold our bag in half and sew up the one side seam that we have. You want to make sure that you backstitch at the beginning and end while you are sewing these two pieces together to create the bag shape. Next, we're going to move on to sewing the bottom seam. So while it is still folded in half, we're going to sew across that bottom seam only. And remember, again, you want to backstitch at the beginning and end of the seam. We are going to repeat these 2 stitches on the lining. We are going to sew the side seam and the bottom seam. Before we move over to the ironing board, we're also going to sew our handles. I'm going to put the 2 right sides of the orange fabric facing each other, and I'm going to sew up either side of the handle. And you want to make sure, again, that you are backstitching at the beginning and the end. One side done. Now we're going to do the other side. And then move on to the other handle. Time to press open those seams. It's always essential to press as you go so that your end project looks impeccable and neatly done. I'm going to press open the side seam and the bottom seam of my 2 bag areas. Then I'm going to grab my handles and I'm going to press back the seam allowance that specifically has the heavier canvas on it. But if you really want to go the full extra mile, you will want to press them both back. Now it's time to finish the bag. I'm going to finish the bag by opening up the bottom, matching up the side seam with that bottom seam, and it's going to create this straight line that I'm going to sew across. Then I'm going to do the exact same on the bottom. This helps create that very square bottom look for this bag. It makes it so that you can actually easily fit stuff in it, and because I have such structure in it, it will actually stand up on its own. I want to do this for both the fabric with the fashion on it as well as the lining. I have really fun lining fabric, so it's kind of hard to tell the difference between my fashion and my lining fabric. Now it's time to flip those handles right side out. I'm going to use a safety pin. I'm going to pin in and out of the canvas side because that's going to be a much stronger side. Then I'm going to feed my safety pin through the handle and get it to flip right side out. It's always a little bit tricky to get it started and get the fabric first flipping itself inside out. But once you really get it started and start pulling everything through, that's when it actually starts moving and going a little bit faster. There we go. Here it comes, nice and slow. There we have it. Then we are going to move back to the ironing board really fast and give these handles a press. We want to make sure they look really nice and crisp, so we want to give them a good press before we top stitch the edges down. This is an optional part. However, I always recommend top stitching them down because it's going to help hold everything in place, make sure those handles don't twist on you funny or anything like that, as well as making it look that much crisper of a project. There we have it. Now it's on to making the stem. The first step we're going to do is we're going to sew the side seam of both the top and bottom part of the stem. I wanted to make sure the stem looked really nice and crisp. That's why I decided to bag it out. Once they're sewn, we're going to move over to the ironing board and iron those seams open. Once they're ironed open, it's back to the sewing machine where we're going to line up all the points. I'm going to start by lining up the side seams that I just stitched and then go around and pin all of the points together. Once all of the points are pinned together, it's time to start sewing. Whenever I sew points, I always do a single stitch at the very top of the point and at the very bottom if it's like a concave point. So you see me here, I am stitching up one side of the point, going to where the 1/2 inch seam allowance will meet at the top. Then I'm doing a single stitch across the top, going down the other side, and then doing a single stitch at the bottom, and continuing all the way around my stem until all of the stem points are sewn. Once all of the points are sewn, it is time to clip in to those points at the bottom and clip away some of the fabric at the top. You want to do this so that you are releasing the fabric and you can get those crisp points at both the top of the points and at the base of the points. We want to get that fabric out of there so that it doesn't create extra bulk. When you do this, however, make sure that you are not clipping away too much or clipping through your stitch line. If you do that, you are going to have to re-sew, so just be extra careful as you are doing it. Once you have them all clipped and ready, it's time to flip them right side out. I'm going to first flip them with my finger, getting them as far out as I can. Then I'm going to use a point turner to crisp up all of those points. You do want to be extra careful that you are not pushing too hard and pushing your point turner through the stitch line because you have narrowed the fabric on the edge there. So just be extra careful as you are pushing that you don't push too hard to poke your point turner through. Once all the points are flipped, it's time to move back to the iron and press all of the points. This is very essential to make sure everything looks nice. And if you have some issues, like I was having a few of my points weren't wanting to go fully pointed, it is sometimes handy if you have a metal point turner. You can put the metal point turner in between the two fabrics and then iron with that metal point turner in there. And then you won't get those drag lines that I was getting. But you do need one of those really thin metal point turners that are most commonly paired with like a seam gauge. They are a very handy tool to get these points nice and crisp. Then we're going to attach the stem to the fashion fabric of the bag. I'm going to line up these side seams and make sure that everywhere else is lined up nice and close. And then we are just going to do a basting stitch or a long stitch all the way around to marry them so that they can now act as one piece of a pattern instead of two. Before I go and do my fold back, I want to marry my lining fabric with my fashion fabric. I always like to do this right at the base, at the box corner area. That way, when I'm flipping the bag right side out, inside out, or whatever I choose, they will always stay together. I find this is so helpful to make sure your bag doesn't twist funny when you're using it or anything else wonky happening. I'm going to line up my bottom boxy part and sew in the seam allowance of both. I'm going to move on to the other side and do the exact same thing. I want to line up the boxy part of the seam and then stitch in the seam allowance, marrying the lining fabric with the fashion fabric. Next, it's time to iron down the facing. We want to iron this down so that all of our raw edges are contained in between the fashion fabric and the lining. I'm going to press back an inch all the way around on my fashion fabric, and then I'm going to move to press back an inch all the way around on my lining fabric. Make sure that you are pressing this back towards the wrong side so that the front side has a clean finish. Once we have that done, we're going to flip our lining up over the inside of our fashion fabric, lining up the side seam and matching the fabric all the way around. And we are going to want to pin this fabric. You can either pin it so that it matches exactly, or you can pin it so that your lining fabric is approximately 1/8 of an inch below if you're never planning to use this as a reversible bag. If you want it reversible, I highly recommend lining up both the fashion fabric and the lining fabric evenly around the top. Once we have the top edges lined up, before we sew, we want to insert our handles. Now, where your handle placement should go might be hidden right now, so I eyeballed it from the side seam, pinned it in, and tested it out. This is a great way to make sure that you are happy with where your handles are laying. Make sure that when you actually pin your handles, you are happy with the placement, the length, and that they match each other. Then it's time to sew all the pieces together. You are sewing the fashion fabric to the lining fabric along that top edge, as well as going over the handles. When you're going over the handles, I highly recommend doing an extra back stitch at the beginning and end to give them just a little bit more sturdiness, a little bit more strength right at the points of tension. And that's all. Now it's time to admire your new amazing bag that can flip inside out to right side out. Ooh, I love this pumpkin bag with handles so much. And there you have it. Your pumpkin tote is ready to use. You can fill it with candy, use it as a gift bag, or carry it around as your new Halloween accessory. Remember, you can find the pattern in the description below. And if you want more crafty fun, make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next fun projects that are coming out. I'm wishing you a handmade Halloween full of treats. I will see you in some of my other videos. Happy sewing!